Good afternoon and welcome to this third session of the day. This session is all about research for the public good, and what we're going to do in this session is bring that idea, research to the public good, to life with three fantastic presentations. I'm Ed Humpherson. I'm the head of the Office for Statistics Regulation, and my job is to ensure that government statistics and data do serve the public good, that they're trustworthy, that they're high quality and high value. And that's really the theme of this afternoon's discussion. The purpose is to really demonstrate the importance of engagement with a wide audience, engagement not just with academics and policymakers, but with a broader public, and how important that is and how beneficial that is in public good projects. Before introducing the speakers, I just want to mention three pieces of work that are kind of relevant here that I'm involved with. Two from my own organisation, OSR, and one from ADR UK itself. So as OSR, we look at government statistics and uses of statistics, and one of the most high-profile things we've done in the last year has been to do a review across all 4 parts of the UK into how the algorithms used to set exam grades last summer, how effectively they worked. And this is the issue of the very big public outcry and mutant algorithms and all of that. And what our report concluded, published about a month ago, what we concluded was that at the heart of this story is not a technical issue of how data coded into an algorithm, but it's a story about public confidence and public engagement. I think that really goes to the heart of so much that we see in public policy, in fact. Second piece of work I want to mention is an ongoing programme we have in the Office for Statistics Regulation, which is directly researching the public good of statistics. And the reason we have this research programme is that in the world of research and data and statistics, this term, the public good, is used very frequently. It's a commonplace term, but there's surprisingly little embedded research into what people actually understand by it, what people think it means. And we're starting to build up a research program, and if you go to our website, you'll see a couple of early fruits of that research program. So the two things from my organisation, ADR UK, our hosts this afternoon, they themselves are very active in this space, and they're just developing a new public engagement strategy, which I think is going to be crucial for administrative data research over the next couple of years. It's in its final stages of preparation, so definitely watch this space for the ADR UK public engagement strategy. But I don't really want you to spend the afternoon listening to me talk about my own work or ADR UK's work. I think the real purpose of this afternoon is for you to hear from people who are running projects using admin data and the beneficial impact for them, for their projects, the engagement that they've done. In that sense, through these three speakers, presentations, get a really good sense of the public good coming to life. So we'll begin with a three-headed presentation from Northern Ireland, beginning with Aideen Maguire of ADRC Northern Ireland, followed by Trása Canavan from Barnardo's, and then John Hughes from NISRA. John will then hand on to Ruth Gilbert from UCL's eChild team, and then Ruth will hand over to Toby Ogan from the Ministry of Justice Data First team. And just a special shout out to Toby. Toby stepped in at the last minute to replace someone else who couldn't, so many thanks to Toby for being able to do that. And then we'll go to a Q&A, audience questions. And we really want you to not wait until then to post your questions, but to use the question function. It's the little bubble, little speech bubble on the left-hand side of your screen. You use that, post your questions there. I will then pick them up as we go. And I do have some questions prepared in my back pocket, but I'm sure you'd much rather ask your questions than listen to my boring questions. So please do use that function as we go, and then I'll direct the questions to members of the audience. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Aideen now to bring the public good to life for us. Thank you, Aideen.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, guys, for the invitation to speak here today. I'm going to be giving a really quick whistle-stop tour of the public good that we're trying to embed in a programme of work that I'm leading, exploring the long-term mental health outcomes of children known to social services. And I'll touch on working with the Department of Health here in Northern Ireland and Barnardo's, and you'll hear from Trása a little bit later. Just to give a little bit of context, numbers of children in care in Northern Ireland are at a record high, and the story is exactly the same across the UK. And mental ill health is a major concern amongst these populations, partly because of their exposure to adverse childhood experiences before they become known to social services. Perhaps the reason they're known to social services is because of their complex mental health needs, or that their interaction with social services itself has an impact on their mental health. Either way, there's a real need to examine more what's going on within this population. And that's what I'm trying to do with this theme of work, exploring social services data. So Northern Ireland's in a unique position in that we have an integrated health and social care system, which means that social services data can be easily linked to a range of other health related data sets. So for this particular project, I've linked 30 years worth of social services data to death records, prescription medication data, psychiatric hospital inpatient data, and self-harm data to create the UK's first population-wide longitudinal study of the long-term mental health outcomes of children known to social services. And this is the first time the social services data have been used to this extent for research before. And I just want to make a little note to say that I think having the ADR brand behind you when you're going to ask for data in terms of data acquisition is a lot stronger than a lone researcher coming to ask and search for data. The project is really co-produced in partnership with the Department of Health, the head of Looked After Children and Adoption Policy, Aideen Lawson, and Director of Family and Children Policy, Elish McDaniel. And these guys, along with myself and a couple of ADR Northern Ireland colleagues, are the steering group. That's it. It's a very small group, but I think what's important is that we have the right people in the room. I think in terms of embedding public good and in terms of impact, it's about making sure you're talking to the right people at the beginning of the research, the right people who can make the decisions throughout. We also collaborate very closely with our stakeholders, Trása, Canavan and Barnardo's, who you'll hear from, and the Northern Ireland Children's Commissioner, Kula Yusiomo. In terms of the steering group and how it works, we have triannual meetings where we develop research questions, and the input from the Department of Health is really important here. We present preliminary results, we then discuss the interpretation of these results. And again, the Department of Health are really important here in that they know about things like changes in policy, changes in the delivery of services, which may affect trends that we're reporting upon. We then go back, do some more analysis based on their recommendations. And in terms of the dissemination of results, not only do we disseminate to them, we disseminate the usual academic way, but also they help us in dissemination, sharing with their colleagues who may be interested. I think what's important is that within this group, we're aware of everyone's what everyone wants from the research, and without overgeneralizing, researchers have their own agenda in terms of papers, academic agendas. There's a service delivery agenda, there's policy agenda, along with user experience. All of this is important when considering impact. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the results. We have a lot of them, but I'm just going to give some headline results to anyone that's interested. What we find is that almost 1 in 10 individuals aged under 45 in Northern Ireland currently are or have been known to social services. Individuals, we observe 10 times the rate of antidepressant prescribing in looked after children compared to those not known to social services, 50 times the rate of antipsychotic prescribing, and 25 times the rate of self-harm. What we've also found is that over 1 in 6 of all young people who die by suicide were previously known to social services. And it was findings like this that meant that we became cited twice in the new strategy for care experienced children and young people, which was published last month. And throughout the last 3 years, working with ADR and with the Department of Health, we've built a really strong relationship with our co-producers in the Department of Health, which means that we've been asked to contribute to new strategies in this coming year. Now, Aideen, who's the head of Looked After Children Adoption Policy, who we work very closely with, wasn't able to attend today, but she did provide some quotes that I'm just going to read through quite quickly before I hand over to Trása. Aideen says, for me, evidence can derive from a number of sources. Evidence from relevant research is important. However, we also need to consider data, practice, and stakeholder feedback. All are essential to effective policy making. She says, as a department, we regularly receive feedback from children's rights organisations and other stakeholders that the right data does not exist and further development in this area is needed. And that's where we stepped in and attempted to bridge this gap with the data that we have available through linking administrative data sets. And when we were able to receive this data and present results to Aideen, she stated that I couldn't believe how much data is collected relating to children in care. However, in the main, it's static. They take a picture at one point in time and doesn't necessarily track a child's journey into, through and out of care. This is why we need to examine data over longer periods. That's how we learn what works and what didn't work for individual children. And that's really the main focus of our research project. Aideen says the preliminary findings were available to further support the need for enhanced mental health services for looked after children and care leavers, and that's in the strategy that I just mentioned. So throughout this programme of research, we've built a really strong partnership with the Department of Health, and I think that relationship has led to a real co-production of work that, as we can see, is informing policy and decision making in Northern Ireland. So I'm going to hand over to Trása now to talk about her experience of working within this research group as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Aideen. So I'm just going to say a few words about why Barnardo's became involved with Aideen's project. And I suppose as a children's charity and service provider, we know all too well about the challenges that care experienced children and young people face. However, this knowledge and understanding that we have is from our experience, and therefore it's anecdotal. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you all how difficult it is, if not nearly impossible, to drive policy change with anecdotal evidence alone. Departments and commissioners, they want to make sure they're investing public funds effectively, and that when they invest it, that's informed by evidence-based policy and practice. So this deep analysis that Aideen's doing of this administrative data provides the hard evidence base that reflects the reality that we see every single day in our services. And that's really why we were so excited to learn about Aideen's work and become involved in the project. Because ultimately, behind every single one of those statistics, behind every single one of those data points is a child, is a young person in the care system in Northern Ireland who's been impacted by their care experience. And really, the better that we can understand how care experience impacts their well-being, how it impacts their outcomes over their life course, how we can use data to illustrate that, and then also get the children's voice and their story to bring that to life, we can better design our systems to really meet their needs. And really, I think this is just a really great example of how we can use data research for public good, because ultimately we're using it to improve the lives of children and young people. And I'll just hand over to John now.
Thanks, Canavan. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. So, use of linked administrative data inform departmental policy. So I work for NISRA, the Northern Ireland Statistics Research Agency, and government statisticians have been involved in undertaking research as part of the ADR investment since late 2018. So other NISRA colleagues work on the data acquisition and data access side. So we are a funded partnership alongside colleagues in Queen's University, Ulster University, and so I've listed the core aim here, and within that I've highlighted 5 words here which encapsulate what we're all about. So it's administrative data linkage to undertake policy relevant research. And in Northern Ireland, the blueprint for policy delivery is programme for government. So the programme for government is about co-production, it's about collaborating across government departments, across local government, with academia and with other agencies. So using linked administrative data, data, it's tailor-made to influence the cross-cutting programme for government in Northern Ireland. So, this slide depicts the role of policy input throughout the research cycle, and early interaction with policy colleagues is key in terms of developing research questions. At the end of the research, sorry, at the start of the ADR investment in 2018, NISRA held a workshop with small government departments, and that was instrumental in terms of addressing data gaps and identifying data gaps and identifying research questions, all linked to the programme for government. So we also held follow-up workshops with government departments as well. I suppose the key point here is that policy input, it's it's not in terms of the research cycle, it's not a linear process. So it's about consulting early with policy colleagues and also consulting with them on a fairly regular basis. So, by way of example, I'll give an example of some of the outworkings from recently published ADR research on alcohol-specific and drug-related mortality. And again, the impetus for this work came from the initial stakeholder workshop where a Department of Health official advised that more information was needed in terms of the drivers behind the recent increases in drug and alcohol deaths in Northern. The two main strands of the research. There was a socio-demographic element which profiled alcohol-specific and drug-related mortality, and that was useful in terms of addressing data gaps on the socio-economic side. There was also a modelling aspect which identified the most at-risk groups for alcohol and drug-related mortality. We looked at socio-demographic, health and area characteristics. In order to answer the research question, we used a linked dataset, which linked Northern Ireland 2011 census to subsequent tests right through 2017. It was a rich population level dataset. So a quick flavour of the findings then. In terms of alcohol and drug mortality, there was marked increases in age standardised mortality rates over the last 15 to 20 years. We looked at that in depth. There was variation by age, by gender, and by area. In terms of the most at-risk groups, for alcohol, no household access to a car, males living alone, having been separated, divorced and widowed, and middle age, so age 45 to 64. Similar for drugs in terms of males and living alone, but as a younger demographic, those less than 45 years. Also, there's excess risk for those with lower educational attainment and the economically inactive. So it's early days in terms of the policy translation. I mean, the alcohol report was only published a few weeks ago, but policymakers have indicated that our results will inform the development of the alcohol and drug strategy, which is currently under review, and in particular, particularly valuable in terms of providing information for harm reduction programmes. Our research results will also add to the evidence base for the overarching public health strategy in Northern Ireland, making life better. And what's particularly important there is the reinforcing the importance of primary preventative action there. Research results are also directly related to programmes for government in Northern Ireland. There's indicators and actions in there on preventable mortality and harm reduction, and also there's a key focus on reducing health inequalities. NISRA statisticians sit on the Programme for Government Statistician Group, and that will be a key concept in terms of translating ADR research findings into a multifaceted programme for government. The initial research has also led to follow-up research in terms of addressing some of the data gaps with prisoners and ex-prisoners and access and risks of mortality. Also, we'll be looking at death in persons under 45 years, particularly in terms of suicide, alcohol and drug deaths. Some of the main press outlets in Northern Ireland, they picked up on our research findings recently, so the Irish News and the Belfast Telegraph, and that was useful in terms of our translation of extending the reach of the research findings. So the Minister for Health, Minister Swan, he also highlighted that our research will add to the evidence base for the development of the new drug and alcohol strategy, and I think that's beneficial in terms of an early acknowledgement from the Minister in terms of the research. Sorry, as well, addiction NI, they also shared their views in our research, and again that was useful in terms of making the connection between the research findings and what the real issues with problematic alcohol usage on the ground, so lack of connectedness and the impact of isolation. 3 days in terms of impact. For key stakeholders in the Department of Health, they passed on the research report to key stakeholder groups. We'll be presenting our findings to these groups over the next few weeks and months. I'd like to acknowledge Research Support Unit NISRA for their assistance, and also the funders ASRC, and also stakeholders who co-produced the research, so the Department of Health, colleagues in NISRA, Queen's University and the Public Health Agency. So there are some contact details that will, sure the slides will be shared after the event. So thanks for listening. I'll now hand you over to Ruth.
Thank you. Can people hear me? Okay. Okay, you can, right, I just need to see my slides. Are they coming up? Okay, thank you. Okay, can you, I've lost the change in the slide bit, I need you. So hello, thank you very much. I'm going to be talking to you about the eChild database, which stands for Education and Child Health Insights from Linked Data. So this is a partnership funded by ADR UK, involving an academic team working on the data build and the evaluation of the linkage and exemplar studies, and then Department for Education and NHS Digital are working on making the data available for wider reuse. Slide, please. Sorry, slides, please. Thank you. So just an overview, eChild involves linking the National Pupil Database, which involves schools data and social care data, with hospital episode statistics, which is for all NHS contacts in England. So because these data are longitudinal and they cover over 20 years, then we can follow children from birth through to early adulthood. Next slide, please. So a key, next slide. Sorry, I can't do the no, thank you. Strengths of eChild. Right, okay, thank you. Strengths of the eChild database are obviously that it's de-identified and it's very large. So we're looking at, we've linked 14.7 million pupils born since 1995. And that linkage rate has been very high. So 98% of children in the MPD database have linked to a hospital record, which is surprisingly high. The thing is that this data is accessible in the ONS safe haven, so it's obviously very safe. Can you move to the next slide, please? So a key point in the next slide shows our timeline of our database, and what you'll see here is that we started working on these data permissions a very long time ago, back in 2014, and we started public engagement and involvement at that point, and it's really continued from then on. So it's a issue of repeated and iterative engagement. And the other point on this slide I wanted to show is that for phase 2, making the research ready data available for wider reuse, we're expecting that to happen later on in 2021. Next slide, please. So I'm going to use the Wellcome Trust public engagement onion that you'll see here to kind of show you some of the activities that we've been using in our public engagement. From the right side of the onion, you'll see activities are about informing, and then as you move to the left, it's about dialogue, but particularly involvement in decision making. So I'm going to describe some of that. Next slide, please. So we've been, whom did we involve? We've been involved in 4 different groups that I'll talk about. So first of all, groups representing the interests of children. Secondly, children, young people and parents themselves. Thirdly, service providers, commissioners, and lastly, government. So next slide, please. So so for the groups representing the interests of children, right at the start of this work, when we were part of the ADR Administrative Data Research Centre for England, we first went to talk to different charities representing children with additional needs and additional health and education needs, to talk to them about research linked education and health data. And we wanted to understand their perspectives on this and what they thought would be the support from the families that they're engaged with. So you can see the red squares on the different activities. And so they were very positive at that stage. And they also highlighted areas of research that they thought would be really important. And two of the organisations actually wrote letters of support. And this was very important for influencing decision making by ethics committees and by government data providers. We also have one of those groups involved in an advisory group role. Next slide, please. So the second. The next thing that we'll be doing, so the next thing to point out is that the children and young people engagement has involved facilitated groups. Now these tend to be groups that are between 4 and 30 people involved. And they're often people that are supported by charities like the National Children's Bureau and Great Ormond Street Hospital, in fact, to help so that these young people can advise us about research. And we've also got one of those as a committee representative. And I'm just going to show you some of the feedback that we've had from these groups. Next slide, please. So we were engaging with 3 groups, about 30 different people. And the feedback that we got, this was about using eChild generally for research. And the feedback we got was high levels of acceptance for using research if it was de-identified and safeguarded, using data for research if it was de-identified and safeguarded. Very positive about looking at links between health and education, and actually significant interest in expanding linkages. So on several occasions, there was discussion about linkage to benefits data. But what was really clear from this engagement was many of these parents and children really didn't know about these databases existing at all, even though they've been used for many years, and didn't know about the research being generated from them. So I think it shows that there's a real a job to be done in terms of publicising these data more by the government data providers and by the researchers with flexible publications. Next slide, please. In more recent engagement that we've been doing with eChild, we've been looking at a specific one which is around the links between health and school absence. And in 3 sessions with over 50 children in the last month, we learned that this was an extremely emotive topic, and children and parents felt very strongly about it. We learned that schools respond differently. There were problems with children not being believed and feeling need to have a diagnosis in order to justify absence, and issues about schools not talking to families and treating children more like statistics and concerned about their absence rankings. One of the things on the right that we learned was a sort of shift in focus from reducing absences to improving the support system for young people while absent. So next slide, please. So the third group we looked at were people from the front line of service provision. So we've involved a headmaster as a co-investigator, sorry, head teacher, yeah, these days, head teacher involved in one of our studies, so very much in a partnership. And we've also involved people working in children's community child health. So, and this is what we're working with iteratively, month as the projects go through. And this is really important because we need to understand from the front line how the services work that generate the data, so that we can understand and interpret variations that we see in the data against the services that are actually provided. Then lastly, next slide, is the fourth group is, of course, government, and these are very much up on the decision making area on the left. Here we're partnering with the NHS Digital and the Department for Education, and the Department for Health and Social Care are also co-funding a project for us. So these are very much sort of co-producing and delivering the project with us, and so that's really close engagement. But we've also been doing some of the blue area, which is, you know, informating thinking about projects. So, for instance, we've done several seminars with DFE and DHSE and question and answer sessions where we're talking about eChild and stimulating thinking about potential uses, and that fed back to, some of that's been fed back to the ADR UK for, you know, thinking about further funding for wider use of this. So that's some examples of how we're working. So I'd just like to tell you about a next phase that actually start happening next week, where we'll be holding a stakeholder event, again to go back to those organisations that represent children's interests. So this will be a sort of meet the eChild team, including government event, where it's an opportunity for stakeholders to question and perhaps challenge the eChild team, and also to contribute to priorities for further research, and that too may in time through ADR UK become a sort of more regular format. So that's some of the approaches, and the last slide simply acknowledges the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So my name is Toby Ogan, and I am a social researcher from the Ministry of Justice, and hopefully a good stand-in for Amy Summerfield, who is the head of research, academic engagement and commons for the Data First project here at MNJ. So what is the Data First project? So what is the Data First project? So Data First is an ambitious data linking project that we lead on here at MNJ, which is externally funded by ADR UK. So the project's main aim is to unlock the potential data we create in MNJ, whether it be through our courts, prisons or probation services, by developing anonymized research-ready data sets for analysts across government and accredited researchers within academia to access and use in an ethical and responsible way. So the project also looks to enhance the wealth of justice data by linking it with data from other government departments. By working in partnership with academics and analysts to facilitate research in the justice space, we're hoping to create a system of a body of knowledge around justice system users and their interactions with our public services, helping to provide evidence that can be used to underpin the development of government policies and tackle both social and justice problems. So the potential of linking data under Data First is immense. So by linking civil, family and criminal justice administrative data sets, we can really build a picture around our justice system users' interactions with our different services and develop a better understanding of what works, enabling us to inform the development of government policy and the various services we provide. So the project also creates a new relationship with research and academic partners, which will allow us to identify priority areas of analysis and make the best use of our data. For example, to reduce the extent of repeat use of the justice system. As I previously mentioned, the project is also looking to link our justice data with other government departments and hopes to develop an understanding of how justice system users also interact with other government services, giving us insight into their needs and the common characteristics between users such as their educational background. Hi, sorry about that.
No, I think we're having a few difficulties with Toby's connection there. So what I suggest we do is when Toby comes back, we pick up where she's left off. But in the meantime, we have had a couple of questions already. So I'm actually going to suggest we go to one which was related to John's presentation, which was from Paul Allen, who's the head of the Statistics User Forum, and therefore obviously someone who's very very keenly committed to user engagement. And Paul asked you, John, how you engage with stakeholders beyond government, beyond policymakers. So John, if you could quickly pick up on that, and then we'll go back to Toby.
Yeah, well, we will be presenting our work, I mean, over the next few weeks to key stakeholder groups that will have, you know, representation from the public and you know, a wide range of different groups. So yeah, I suppose, you know, we've also got links again with academics who are involved in with different networks and so on. So I think that's the avenue that we would be going down on that one.
When we go to the full Q&A panel, we can come back to those sort of questions of broader engagement. But I think Toby's back with us. So Toby, back to you.
Yeah, sorry, some technical difficulties. So in terms of what the project actually involves, it involves both the internal linking of our data, whether that's across MOJ HQ, with HMCTS for our court services, or HMPPS for our prison and probation services, as well as externally linking our data with other government departments and external bodies. It involves the mapping of our data across MOJ, looking at the scope, breadth and quality of it to create data catalogues for various shares, both the research and sharing elements to ensure we make the best use of the new form data sets to help inform policy development, and also an element of sharing lessons learned from this project, as it is a pioneering project across both government and academia. So although it's a very ambitious project, a project such as Data First produces many benefits to the department, the wider civil service and the public, whether it's the enhanced insights it brings to policy and operations by enhancing the current understanding of our justice system users, or the evidence gaps that the linked data will attempt to address, which will help enhance our strategic capabilities. Data First also looks to lead and set the direction for improving transparency and access to government data for the public good, so maximising the potential of our data's impact through the development of partnerships with academic experts and NGOs. So this leads me very nicely in the importance of engagement. So through the Data First project, we have established two groups / panels, public and those outside of government. So the first group is our academic advisory group, which we set up nearer to the beginning of the project. So the AAG consists of 8 members with mixed technical and methodological expertise who help to support the project by providing us with advice on different elements, and improving our visibility through academic networks, but it also acts as a critical friend by challenging us on elements of the project and providing us feedback on where we could improve and do better. And then we also have our user representation panel. So I've been doing a lot of work leading on this, and we finally got it into place just before Christmas. So the user representation panel consists of representatives from NGOs that cover civil, criminal and family justice system users. So they all have a variety of and to ensure that the viewpoints and the concerns of different justice system users are met throughout the project. So we have quarterly meetings of our panels, as well as individual meetings/events where we could use really use their insight into the project, or maybe they want to put their own perspectives into the project to ensure that we are covering views from those different justice system users. So as you can see on the slide, these are the groups who currently sit within our user representation panel. So we have some groups such as User Voice, who cover the wider breadth of the criminal justice system. We have Prison Reform Trust to make sure that we're covering the prison sector. We have groups such as the Civil Court Users Association to make sure that we're covering our civil justice routes. And then we also have groups both routes from adult and children's perspective on family justice. So I think that's it for me. If I want to hand over to Ed.
Thanks very much, Toby, and thank you to all of our speakers, both for the presentations, but also for coping with the technical hitches that have been thrown in your way in a very professional manner. Thank you. I jumped in the middle of Toby's presentation with a question for John. There are actually a couple of specific questions for each of you, so I'm going to go to those, and then there's a more general question that I'm also going to pick out. So, Ruth, the question which came for you was from Emma Campbell of the ONS, and she asked whether there are plans to link the eChild project to other data links into the MPD, for example, the MOJ DFE data link set. So I guess the question is about whether you have plans to kind of expand the size of the eChild data set. So Ruth, if you could maybe give us your thoughts on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, really good question. Thank you, Emma. So definitely there's discussion among the partnership about how the eChild data might be enhanced. As you may know, one of the sort of really important aspects of the eChild data set is that we now have an anonymized spine, which links together anonymized identifiers for education with health, and so right, that can be used for an onward de-identified link to other data sets. So that's certainly in discussion. I think there's a lot of issues we worked through about how we do that with additional complex data sets. I'm getting a lot of, I'm not sure if you're able to hear what I'm saying very clearly.
Be able to cut the feedback. Ruth, was there anything else you wanted to say on the development of the spine?
So I mean, it does enable a lot of onward linkage, and you know, there's priorities that are being talked about, such as linkage to mental health data, and linkage to other health data. I think, as Chris Dibben spoke about earlier this afternoon, you know, linking into meaningful household data, such as from census, at some point would be really useful. So, and down the line, I think, you know, clinicians and health researchers will be really interested in how they can link in potentially registry data or richer health data, and including survey data into this. But I think, you know, we need to get up and running with some really good examples of how this data, already extremely rich and useful, can produce impactful research before we start to run with more complex or far-reaching linkages.
Thanks very much, Ruth. That's great. And apologies to everybody for the feedback that came from me. I'm always a keen advocate of a feedback culture. Maybe I've taken it a little bit too far on this occasion. I have a question for Toby. So you have the academic advisory group and then the broader user groups. Just interested in the extent to which you get different kinds of insight from those types of groups, and if you give some examples of the different types of insights that an input that come from the distinct forums. Thank you.
So I think in terms of different perspectives specifically, the user representation panel has a lot more insight in terms of lived-in experiences. So we do have a crossover. Some of our representatives not just work with justice system users, but have lived experience themselves, but also have been academics. And there's that kind of looking at academic perspective, maybe someone who's done years of working in this area and they know about the policy and maybe the gaps in policy and research and what we might need to focus in terms of research priorities and filling those gaps. But then in terms of turning to our user group, they who interact with justice system users on a daily basis, they can see issues that maybe are not within our already developed research priorities or are not outlined in policy currently, and they're making us on these issues from different perspectives that we haven't thought of before. So it's great having those who are experts in the policy area and the research area identifying evidence gaps, and then having this user group, you get to see kind of undersurface stuff that's not really been brought up before previously to take into consideration. So I know with our areas of research interest, we had it tweaked quite a bit by our AAG group who highlighted some areas that we hadn't covered. But with our user representation panel, when they took a look at that, they thought the questions were good and they did highlight evidence gaps, but they thought we were missing a few perspectives from that would fit maybe different diverse groups that we hadn't considered before in the past.
Triggers an observation and then a question actually to go back to Ruth. The observation is, I think it's really fascinating what you said about some people in a sense who kind of inhabit multiple groups. They might be an academic but with lived experience, or they've been so grounded in the issue that they're studying that they can bring kind of quite a breadth of perspectives. I think that's a really powerful point. The question I wanted to pass back to Ruth on the basis of what Toby said was, it reminded me, Ruth, about the point that you made about the term vulnerable and how that came up through your engagement. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that and what you did with that insight. Thank you.
So in brief, we stopped using the word vulnerable or always use it caveated as in association with additional needs. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, this is part of government policy, isn't it? The jargon of vulnerable groups, and both young people and parents didn't like it and found it somewhat stigmatizing. So that was really important because it was putting them off, basically.
Thank you. I'd like to now ask a question of all of you, and I'll go to colleagues in Northern Ireland first, Aideen first, and then on from there. And the question comes from Ed Morrow, and it's a really good and quite kind of wide-ranging question. His question is: in all of the cases that you've talked about, you've built engagement in sort of throughout the process of the admin data research project that you're involved with. It's not been a sort of tokenistic thing that you've done at the end, it's been through life. I really would like to get your thoughts on how we can normalize that, because I think there is a sense that sometimes there is a sense of tokenism, back end of the project tokenism about engagement. So really it'd be really great to get more about how we can normalize into all all admin research practice, the kind of things that you're now doing so well. So I'll start with Aideen and then get thoughts from all of you. Aideen.
Sure, thanks, Ed, and thanks for the question. I think it's a difficult one to answer easily without just encouraging researchers to do it. And my advice would be that, having worked previously where I put my hands up and admit there has been times where it's token engagement at the end to fulfill funders' agreements, and actually worked properly co-producing work in such as the method on today, that it's invaluable. It's valuable to me as a researcher, it's valuable to the guys that engage, the stakeholders and policymakers, but also from like an administrative data point of view. And there are lots of questions about, well, what do you get from the collaboration with the stakeholders? But I think it's what they get and what we get in return. In terms of the project that I've worked on, we found lots of issues with data quality, things that were very easily fixed, and they would be very easily fixed if, from a policy top-down perspective, people were encouraged in the front line to make sure they have complete health and care number in the data set, to make sure that they are putting things in the correct folders. But then that feeds back to us, giving us as researchers better data sets to work with, and also strengthens the data that we're then using to inform policy. So I would look at it as something that you're just doing for a funder or for somebody else, but the real benefit has been substantial, that I wouldn't do research the other way now.
Brilliant, and I think that point that you made, Aideen, about data quality is really, really well made, and I think we probably have a whole session just about that, how engagement helps data quality. So other colleagues from Northern Ireland, Trása or John, anything you'd like to say about the idea of normalising? Let's go to Trása first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a two-way process, because some data analysis for kind of different surveys and things like that. And when being on the other side of it, in Barnardo's, I think it's important to show how that data can be used to benefit an organisation and the way it works, that it's not just an onerous requirement, say, put on our practitioners out in the field who are working with kids and young people, and you're telling them, can you record this data? Can you record it well because of X, Y, and Z? So really having that communication and making sure that, as Aideen said, that the reason why you're doing it is to achieve those long-term outcomes. It's not that you put this data in and then it goes away and it's kind of stored and never used. It's actually most useful whenever researchers take it, analyse it, and actually then use it to inform policy development. And I think that's where kind of these building of relationships is most effective and most important, because you're getting that impact and you're getting the buy-in from the very beginning.
Brilliant, thank you. Ruth, any thoughts on how to normalise the practices that you're now doing into every project?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of two points. First of all, fund. I mean, this takes a lot of effort and time, particularly because children don't remain children and young people for very long. So there's a turnover in terms of needing to sort of engage with new children and young people. So that needs stable funding, and funding for these additional outputs that are more accessible for the public. And I think the second point is to require that at every stage. So yesterday I was engaging with a group called Scope, who represent families with disability. And I had to look back at the National Pupil Database on the web, because they were coming back again. They didn't know this data existed, and really it's impenetrable. The Department for Education website about MPD. It's great for people like me, so I never realised, was never looking at it with their eyes. And that's a message right from data providers, ONS as well, onwards, that we need to be much more user-friendly in terms of explaining the data, and that will build trust and will, it is going to be the glue between researchers, data providers, government, and the public understanding each other, because there are quite a number of advocacy groups that are opposed, that have been set up and are opposed to the use of data. And so the more there are accessible outputs, the more there's transparency, and the easier it is to sort of have these discussions, the less of that kickback and distrust I think there's going to be. So I think it's really worth investing in it.
Ruth, a quick follow-up question, if I may. You mentioned the onion, which obviously came from Wellcome, and that's a sort of a health data kind of concept. Do you think it could be used in any kind of social science research using admin data, the kind of framework of the onion?
Oh yeah, no, I think it's utterly transferable, and in many ways, I think it's what a lot of you are doing that we've been hearing about today. So yes, some sort of framework like that. But I think, you know, what health is probably far beyond social science in terms of engagement, public engagement, and the emphasis that we're now hearing from health is it's got to make a difference. It's got to lead to changes in decisions. So that emphasis on, you know, what is the impact? What decision did it inform, rather than just the window dressing? That's the question that needs to be asked of, you know, what difference does it make?
Thanks, Ruth. Toby, what are your thoughts on how we can normalise the sorts of things that you've been doing in Data First across the government side of admin data research?
I think just showcasing the benefits and the results of projects like this. So I think a lot of people see these engagement tasks as something that's just a checklist, not incredibly helpful. It could bring in people with conflicting viewpoints and could do more damage than good. So they don't really see the potential of it. But I think if we can highlight how, if we have people giving different perspectives, there might not be a piece of research where it's critiqued because we haven't considered different things that maybe a public engagement panel or group would have helped us to consider beforehand. And that could help us in the long terms in terms of making the most out of our work, or making the most out of the recommendations for policy. And I think touching upon what Ruth said about advocacy groups and things like that, if you can build that trust with the public, if we can introduce more transparency into our projects and the work that we do as government departments, then you're a lot less likely to get that bother from advocacy groups. They're more likely to want to work with you and promote the work that you're doing. It can reduce the amount of freedom of information requests that you get. So in the long term, it could really help boost the efficiency and maximize the potential of the work that you do. And I just don't think that people are seeing that right now. So I think it's our jobs to promote lessons and learns from projects like this, so people can start to see the positives of public engagement.
Thank you, Toby. I'm afraid to say, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. So just before I go to thanking our speakers and you as attendees, I should say that if you have any other questions, which you may well do because it's been such a rich and interesting session, I think it's probably easiest to direct them either to the ADR or directly to the speakers this afternoon. I think have had their contact details available on the slides. Definitely don't direct them to me because I really don't know what I'm talking about compared to the range of expertise that we've got here. And because I'm not expert, it's been an absolute pleasure to listen to what you've had to say and to the presentations you've made and how you've responded to the audience's questions. So thank you very, very much to all of you. I think it's been, I said at the beginning that you're here to bring public engagement and public good to life. I think you definitely fulfilled that. But actually, as you were talking, I was thinking of an even more powerful message, which is, you know, for those of us who really care about admin data being a resource for research, hearing your presentations reminds me why we do it. We do care about admin data research because it enables projects like yours, and projects like yours then enable amazing new insights, which can really impact on people's lives. So it's been fantastic. Thank you to all of you, and have a lovely afternoon. And I hope, as the audience, you found that as helpful and as I have. Thank you.